Is this the end of forests? Trees dying because of direct human intervention such as logging. These trees are dying without humans laying a hand on them, at least physically, and they are not resprouting. Forests cover 30% of the planet's land surface, and yet, as humans heat the atmosphere, some locations where they would have grown now appear too dry or hot to support them. In western North America, huge swaths of forested areas may become unsuitable for trees owing to climate change. In the Rocky Mountains, estimates hold that by 2050, about 15% of the forests would not grow back if felled by fire because the climate would no longer suit them. In Alberta, Canada, about half of existing forests could vanish by 2100. In the southwestern U.S., which is experiencing a mega drought, as much as 30% of forests are at risk of converting to shrubland or another kind of ecosystem. The change isn't unique to the U.S. In the Amazon, some experts warn that a forest mortality tipping point is looming. The boreal forests of Canada and Siberia are under attack from higher temperatures. Temperate European forests thought to be less vulnerable to climate change are showing worrying symptoms. Forest mortality researchers say while this does not mark the end of the forests, it may well be the end of many forests as we've known them. Iconic species such as giant sequoias and Joshua trees are succumbing in remarkable numbers. The landscapes of beloved wild places and national parks are, in turn, being transformed. And the changes being observed today, in which slow-growing trees that have survived for hundreds of years are dying in a drought or wildfire, cannot be undone in our lifetimes. The possibility of worldwide mass forest mortality linked to climate change was flagged in the first Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Assessments in 1990. But today, many researchers are expressing particular concern about the tree mortality crisis building in California and other parts of the West. Since 2010, 129 meters trees are estimated to have died in California's national forests, as a result of a hotter climate, insects and other factors. Astonishingly, 48.9% of all trees in a comprehensive study of the southern Sierra Nevada mountain range were killed. Dehydration is not always the culprit when trees die in droughts. Droughts often create such hostile conditions that trees with decades or centuries of life ahead of them are suddenly vulnerable to insects or disease, or to wildfires that can rampage when the environment dries out. Researchers acknowledge that there is considerable ambiguity in their predictions about tree mortality. For one thing, it is unclear how many of the trees now dying essentially weren't meant to be there in the first place. Western forests are denser than they were historically because of human influence. The practice of tamping out wildfires, beginning in the early 20th century, has interfered with the natural process in which blazes weed out younger trees and undergrowth. Not far away, ecologist Craig Allen just marked his 40th year studying forests and landscapes in the Jemez Mountains. When he arrived from the cooler climes of northeast Wisconsin, moist weather patterns made the region a great place to be a tree in the southwest U.S. That natural variability has now, thanks to climate change, flipped to mega-drought conditions. By mid-century, Allen suspects, trees will barely cling to existence in the mountains of the southwest. Around the globe, research has suggested that the tree mortality rate in some temperate and tropical forests has doubled or more in recent decades. In the Amazon, climate change has lengthened the dry season and caused the rainfall to decline in parts. These shifts are reorganizing the forest. Trees that prefer drier conditions are thriving, while those that prefer wetter conditions, and which make up the majority of tree species in Amazonia, are dying off in greater numbers. With the combined impacts of global heating and rampant logging, some researchers warn that large parts of the rainforest ecosystem could collapse and convert to savanna. Cooler regions are not immune. Boreal forests ringing the northerly parts of the globe are in fact projected to experience the greatest warming of all. In central Siberia, conifers are already dying at greater rates and are expected to retreat upslope and to the north. One boreal forest researcher told Yale Environment 360 that boreal forest is breaking apart. Even forests thought more impervious to climatic shifts are proving not to be. In Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, heat and low rainfall in 2018 caused mass mortality among species such as Norway spruce and European beech. The German government estimated that at least 2,450 square kilometers would need to be reforested. A great irony of this shift is that trees are dying just as we understand them better than ever. It has become clear that far from being inert and silent, and little more than a backdrop for wildlife, trees are able to communicate with one another and even share resources. Forests also absorb around 1/4 of all human carbon emissions annually, and increasingly there are worries that if forests die back they will switch from storing carbon to emitting it, because dead trees will release all the carbon they have accumulated. This helps explain why much touted proposals to plant millions of trees to suck up carbon and ameliorate the climate crisis are encountering skepticism. They won't work if conditions on Earth don't allow for forests to reproduce and thrive. It is true that forests could find new footholds in places that were formerly too cold or otherwise unsuited to them. But trees can take centuries to reach maturity, and in terms of global heating, older, large trees store much more carbon than younger, smaller ones. Instead of focusing on new trees, researchers say, the best answer to the mortality crisis is to preserve the forests we already have, by cutting carbon emissions. Wearing a mask is highly effective and can make your daily life safer for those around you, but it's not a permission slip to return to normal. It's important to stay home when you can and continue practicing other coronavirus prevention measures like social distancing to help reduce the spread.